Camera good. Hey guys. I can't. Whoa, that lighting. We're gonna figure this out eventually.
Is this live, by the way?
This is live already, yeah. And there we go. Lighting's better, kind of. We'll take it.
Perfect.
So, I'm Alex Smades, and we're with the man himself, Tyler Bobo, to talk owner finance today.
Excellent.
I like it. Let's do it. You want to go right into it? Or you want to introduce yourself first?
My name's Tyler Bobo. I'm a realtor here with Alex at Keller Williams. I got into real estate as an investor from the owner finance angle, so I bought and sold a lot of owner finance properties myself, and then it kind of became my niche in the world of real estate to help clients do that. So I'm the guy with a lot of experience in that area.
Yeah, the whole. I would say all of Alaska. You're the owner finance guy. Maybe not all of Alaska.
There's quite a few owner finance guys around, but I definitely do more than any realtor I know in this area. So like down on the Kenai Peninsula, they do a lot more owner finance in general there than they do in the Valley, and Anchorage has very, very little at all. So Anchorage, there's not much of a market there.
Need for it?
I don't know if there's not a need for it so much as a lot of the properties, the price range is higher, and the price range for owner finance tends to work better in the lower price ranges.
Okay.
Yet sometimes it works really well in higher price ranges too, just depending on the circumstance. But it's more of a need in lower entry level homes.
So before we get too deep into it, basic definition, owner finance, like a brief, give me 45 seconds. What's owner finance?
So an owner finance, which is sometimes called seller finance or seller carryback, lots of different terms for it, means that instead of the buyer going to a bank to get the money, if they don't have cash to buy the property, then they make monthly payments after. Usually there's a down payment, and then they make monthly payments to the seller instead. So some people confuse it with a lease option, but the difference is with a lease option, the seller still owns it until you finally purchase it. With an owner finance, the buyer owns it at closing, do a title search and all the normal steps. They own it at closing and make payments to the seller. So they don't have they don't have a landlord. They don't have to ask if they can build a garage or paint the house. It's their house so long as they make the payment. And then the seller's in the position of the bank. So if they couldn't make the payments, they could foreclose just like a bank would if you couldn't make the payments that way.
I like it.
So you take out the bank and everybody else wins.
So the seller plays the bank.
Yep.
Kind of.
Pretty much.
So, and I know this is the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. The bank normally deals with all of the other portions of a mortgage, right? So like taxes and insurance and interest and stuff like that. So when I'm playing the bank, if I'm selling my house to you, owner finance, how do we get those things taken care of?
So the four main parts of your mortgage payment is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
Yep.
And the principal and interest is a monthly payment to the seller, who's now the bank. And the taxes and insurance, which are normally held, like if you get your loan from a bank, they're going to collect for that also. With owner finance, that's optional, and I do recommend it. So we set up the loan through a neutral third party. There's a couple escrow companies that will basically do the math for you and hold the paperwork. So there's none of this, I sent the check, where did it go?
Yeah.
So you send it to an escrow company that takes the money from the buyer, sends it to the seller, and if you pay a little bit extra for their services, you can have them collect for the taxes and insurance as well. I find that to be very helpful when you're buying a house, so that twice a year when the taxes come due or when your insurance come due.
Same with a big old check.
Yeah, instead of having to pay the whole year, you pay a little bit every month, just like you would if you would have gotten your loan from a bank. Sometimes on like land or something really cheap, it's not necessarily worth having them doing that because the tax bill isn't going to be as big. But for a bigger purchase like a home, I do recommend that.
Okay, so now we know what owner finance is. We kind of know how it works. Now I want to talk about, so I'm a seller. I say, super important part I don't think we touched on, you have to own your home free and clear, right?
It's best. We won't get into that too much. If you own your home free and clear or close to it, or could pay it off for money you could find somewhere else at closing, That's the best, easiest route. There are times when you don't have to. It's probably for another call, but sometimes if you have a mortgage on your home that you're trying to sell, the buyer may be able to assume that, and then you can owner finance the difference. There's different things that can be done there, but for the sake of this, if it's owned free and clear, it makes it really easy. And otherwise, give me a call and I'll see what we can do.
I was about to say, have you ever said no to something? Like, there's always something. You're so creative. There's always
there's a lot of different cool ways.
Kind of. It depends on this situation.
Yeah.
Always is the answer.
Well, yeah. That's true. There's usually different ways to do it, but the best way is if it's paid off. Then it's usually a huge advantage for a seller to sell their home on owner finance. If it's not paid off, sometimes it's just easier not to. Just depends on the circumstance.
Makes sense. Okay, so I'm a seller. I own my house free and clear, just to make the example easy. I define my terms, so interest rate and length and all of that stuff. Well, that was weird. That thing flashed. Did you see it?
Nope.
I think it's gonna go out. Anyway, I define all my terms, and then I put my house on the market, and a buyer comes. How do I make sure they are not going to default on me? Like, normally a bank goes through and gets a credit report and does this whole process, and it's a 45-day thing where they do all these crazy things. How do I do that myself as a seller?
Sure. Well, the biggest banks in the world still can't get it right most of the time, so there's no guarantee, right? Or not most of the time, but there's no guarantee even when you go through that whole process, because life changes. People have, life-changing events, and so there's no way to be sure 100% that they're going to make the payment. Your best assurance is to take a quick look at them. You can check out the record on court view. You can ask for a credit report, but here's the thing with the credit report. Most people are looking at owner finance properties because they don't have good credit. So if they don't have good credit, personally, I'm more concerned with why they don't have good credit. And you'll find that a lot of the times it's medical bills and things that are harder to avoid, and a bad divorce.
So with the bad credit, I'm new to this, or I'm not new to this. It can be kind of scary or difficult. What's the safety valve then?
The safety is the down payment. Okay. So say you're selling a house for $150,000. If the guy puts very little down payment and then doesn't make his payments, then they can do damage to the house, and then you've got to foreclose on them, which takes time and money. And at the end of the day, you're in the red. If you get a really good down payment, the chances of that are a lot more minimized for two reasons. Say somebody puts $25,000 down, which is a pretty honest chunk of change for most people, right? $25,000 right off the bat, he's not going to want to lose that. So say his monthly payment is $1,200 or something, and that payment is due. He's going to do whatever it takes to make that $1,200 payment, because he doesn't want to lose his $25,000 down payment worth of equity.
Makes sense.
And on the flip side of that coin, for the seller, if you've got $25,000 down and the guy does end up defaulting and you do have to take it back, even if he's done some damage and it takes some time and money to take the property back, you're likely to still be ahead of the game. If he's put $25,000 down and paid $1,200 a month for like 3 years, that's a lot of money.
Definitely.
So if he does say maybe you take it back and it costs maybe $3,000 to take it back, and then he did like $10,000 worth of damage, which is a lot. It's kind of heartbreaking when you take a property back and you got to put $10,000 into it. Well, if you do the math, you're still way ahead of the game. And even though there's definitely a default rate when you owner finance to somebody who they couldn't get a bank loan, so you owner financed it, there's that risk factor there. However,
so I want to stop you there about the default rate. How would you compare the default rate to tenants and having to evict tenants compared to owner finance and having to foreclose on them?
If you're a really good landlord, you do pretty good at tenant screening, and you don't have to evict people very much. And if there's, you can evict them usually quicker if they do default. So with a owner finance property, of course, with a tenant, you only got a little bit of money down. You've got the security deposit. In the state of Alaska, unless the monthly rent is more than $2,000, you can't charge more than 2 months security deposit. So $1,000 a month rent, you can only have $2,000. Well, hate to break it to you, but that won't hardly get you new carpet, not good carpet.
Yeah.
So if you need carpet and paint, then you've got to chase after them for the difference. If you would have sold the house, you've got a lot more money to do that. So the process is also different.
Okay.
Since you're the owner when you're evicting a tenant, it falls under landlord-tenant law.
Okay.
And you make sure you're up to date on exactly how all that works before you evict them. But it's usually, you can usually get somebody out in 3 to 5 weeks, and there's several variables there. But you gotta serve them notice for 7 days, and then you've got to take them to court and things like that if they don't voluntarily leave. With the owner finance, where hopefully you've gotten a much larger down, if it doesn't work out, there's 2 options to get the property back. One is they agree to give it back in what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and that's your best option.
I was about to say, let's hope for that one every time.
Correct. And I've done so many owner finance deals, and almost always, if you're nice and not a bad guy, once you and them have come to the realization and had open dialogue throughout the whole default time that this isn't working anymore, usually they'll give it back, especially if you can do some sort of incentive like, I won't sue you and take your permanent funds for the next 10 years. So if you take it back, this is what I usually tell them. Once I know that it's not working and they know it's not working, I say that if they give it back to me with a deed in lieu of foreclosure, I'll assume the damages that they've done so long as they don't vandalize it on the way out. I'll pay. I'll actually pay for the process.
There we go. Don't mind that.
I'll pay for the process of the deed in lieu of foreclosure because it's cheaper, and then they'll give it back to me, reasonably empty. So usually when I have to take one back, there is some work that needs to be done. The deed in lieu of foreclosure is a lot cheaper, usually under $500. So I'm willing to pay that and do some work rather than a true foreclosure, because a foreclosure, we're going to leave on less good of terms, and they're more likely to damage it on the way out.
Right.
It takes 92 days in the state of Alaska to do a judicial foreclosure. You go through, and it's a long process, and it costs $2,000 to $3,000 if you're hiring somebody else to do it. You got to post notice in newspapers and all that sort of stuff.
So, eviction and foreclosure, deed in lieu of foreclosure, the rate at which it happens depends on the person, right? Depends on whether you're a good landlord and you screen your people correctly or properly, and then the same thing on the opposite side. One of them's quicker. Eviction's way quicker than deed in lieu of foreclosure.
Eviction is usually way quicker. It would be
Once again, depends on the situation.
I just had a client who it's a long story, but the tenant wouldn't leave, and so she had to do the forcible entry and detainer, which is the type of lawsuit when you have to remove a tenant. You can't remove them yourself, so she did that, and this tenant of hers claimed that he owned the property. So it got confusing. He didn't have any paperwork, but since he made the claim, it drug it out longer, and you do that and only the lawyers win. They're getting paid by the hour. It took months, and I wasn't part of the lawsuit, so I don't know why, but it took months to get him out, which was just a horrible scenario, and that's not how it usually works, of course.
All right, well, let's roll into, I have 3 questions.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about the benefit for owner finance for buyers, sellers, and then investors. So one at a time, let's hit each of those.
Perfect.
2 minutes, let's keep it short. 2 minutes buyers, 2 minutes sellers, 2 minutes investors. So 6 minutes, give me some good stuff.
Big advantage for the buyers that you can get into a home when you wouldn't necessarily be able to with a bank loan. So owner finance for buyers is best suited for somebody who has stable income, good down payment, and not necessarily the credit or job history or something else that's preventing them from going to the bank and getting a normal, conventional FHA style loan.
Okay.
That being said, if you can get that kind of loan, usually it's better because it's cheaper. Owner finance usually is more expensive. It's always negotiable, but the down payment is usually more, the interest rate is usually more, so it ends up costing you more. And it's still better than renting in a lot of cases. So that's the big advantages there.
So for buyers, it's an option. It can get you into something if other people or other entities or other banks say no.
Right, and those other entities, those other banks are are your first process. People call me all the time for owner finance, and the first thing I do is to see if we can get them a better loan. And if not, then owner finance is a fantastic backup plan for a lot of people.
Perfect. So it gives you options.
Yeah, but you do need more down payment usually. Advantage to sellers is your property doesn't necessarily have to be financeable. So you go to sell a house and things have to be up to code. The egress window, you know, if somebody's not paying cash, if they're getting a bank loan, it needs to be to code. And here in Alaska, there's a lot of properties that are not. So if you don't want to fix all those things, you can sell it as a fixer-upper, and instead of somebody going to jump through all the hoops to get a rehab loan, which are hard to get and also more expensive, you can sell it on owner finance, and then let them fix the property, and then refinance it later if they care to.
Makes sense.
The other advantage is that, especially in low price range properties, you can usually sell them at top dollar because people are willing to pay a little bit more for the opportunity to own something when they couldn't get a bank loan.
Right.
So sell it for more, sell it for quicker, sell properties that are in not otherwise financeable condition.
Perfect.
And you make a lot of money the longer you carry the note because the interest is huge. So there's several different advantages for the seller.
So now I think the most important part is, I'm going to reword the question a little bit, and that's how to use owner finance as an investment.
Okay. So when you're buying properties as an investor, if you're buying a lot of properties, one of the great things about owner finance is if you buy several properties, you'll realize that real soon the bank will tire of giving you money, and every time you go to apply for a new loan for your 4th, 5th, or 17th property, it's really difficult, and just getting the paperwork in order. If you've bought a home recently, you know that they want a lot of paperwork. The more properties you have, the more, you know, so basically you can forego the huge amount of work it takes to get a bank loan by doing owner finance.
Okay.
So that's a huge work. Yeah.
Everyone loves that.
Yeah. You can also, like I said, you can buy properties that aren't financeable without getting a rehab loan. So if you're an investor and your idea is to fix it and flip it, or fix it and hold it as a rental, you can get into properties with owner finance. If the seller's gonna offer you owner finance, you can get into a property that won't finance. I mean, the reason you want to buy it at a steep discount is because it needs work. So you can go in there, really quick close. A lot of times in a couple of weeks, you close the deal, and you can start working on it. And if you're paying the owner a monthly payment, you know, you'll have the thing done by the time you could have gotten a bank loan. So the speed and ease of transaction, and just the ability to get them when you couldn't otherwise. And then on the flip side of that, when you go to sell it, if you're an investor selling on owner finance, you're gonna make a lot more money if you plan on holding the note. That's not everybody's investment strategy. Some people sell them on owner finance and then sell the mortgage to somebody else, or maybe they'll buy on owner finance and sell for bank loan.
Okay.
But you'll make a lot more interest. You can usually sell it quicker and at top dollar, particularly, like I mentioned a few times, lower price bracket, entry level homes, really easy to sell quickly for top dollar at on owner finance. So, and again, as the investor, even if you bought it as a fixer-upper, if you plan on selling it owner finance, you don't have to fix everything that would keep it from being bank financeable.
Okay.
So there's some things that are really difficult to fix and really expensive to fix, and you're like, why do I have to fix that? It's safe, you know, it's safe, it's good, it's quality. Sell it on owner finance, and you don't have to do that. So an example of that would be like a stairwell that isn't to code, that would just cost a fortune sometimes to fix, and it's going to mess up the layouts. Like there's no way, there's no good way to fix this. Right. Well, if you can buy it at the right price to where you can fix everything else, and then and then sell it on owner finance, you know, it's like it fixes a lot of problems.
Okay. So I think we covered a lot of good information, but we only scratched the surface.
Absolutely.
Right? So here is where we make our money. You have 30, we'll say 30 seconds. I love time limits, by the way, if you can't tell. Whatever you want. If it's a last thought, a question, a shameless plug, whatever you want, you have 30 seconds. How do these people reach you? Anything like that? Floor is yours.
Well, if you look up Tyler Bobo on Google, Tyler Bobo Realtor, you'll find me. My number is 727-8106. I always have owner finance properties for sale, usually entry-level position or entry-level homes out here in the Mat-Su Valley.
Okay.
Lots of land goes owner finance all the time because it's just easier than getting a bank loan. There's a lot of awesome, cool things you can do with owner finance notes as an investor or even as a seller, where you can, once you hold that mortgage and you're collecting payments on it, you can sell that to somebody else. Or if say you're collecting on a $100,000 mortgage, you can take that to another investor or bank and use that asset to borrow against to go buy your next investment. There's so many cool things you can do with owner finance notes. So if you're thinking about selling a home, and you have the option to owner finance, you should strongly consider doing that.
There it is.
There it is. Owner finance in like 10 minutes.
Signed, sealed, delivered. Watch when we end it. I bet you it's been way more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sure it has.
All right, Tyler Bobo. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Till next time. Now we got to figure out how to end it because I don't know how to do that. Let's see how to do this.
Bottom left looks like an X.
Then it looks like a cancel here. We're just stay with us, guys. We'll figure this out. Here we go. Let's get some of that on there. I don't see any X here.
I thought you were the video guy. I thought you knew how that worked.
I thought I was the video guy too. Look, now we're drawing on the screen. We'll figure this out. Don't worry.
Great.
Who's watching me do this? Look like a fool. It's okay. Cancel. Get out of here. Hey, there we go. Bye, guys.